Let's get rowdy.
I'm going to welcome you back to the Rob Griffin Show, a podcast where truth lives, zero hypocrisy, and none of that crazy bullshit we're seeing on the news today. So, man, do I have a barn burner for you guys today. I have a good friend of mine, a former police officer in the Kenosha, Wisconsin area, and he was actually there when the shit hit the fan, when the big whole, I guess we call it a riot, back when Jacob Blake, I think his name was, he got shot. Anyway, he has the inside scoop that's going to literally have you on the edge of your seat. So without any further ado, I want to bring in my good friend, the one and only Mr. Kevin Raiche. Did I say your name right? Did I get it right?
For the first time ever, Rob, I've known you for 1 year. You said it right. Finally.
Well, I try to avoid saying your name because I don't want to screw it up. So I
don't think it's that scary. One syllable.
So I just say, "Hey, Kev, what's up, bro?" And we just have our little bromance type conversation.
It's easy to say, "Hey, brother, how you doing?"
I do that all the time when I'm dealing with customers. I'm like, I forgot their name. So your name is now brother. So I'm going to welcome you to the show. Hey, man, you're here on episode 2 of a brand new podcast. We're going to be telling the truth, man. We're going to be uncovering the controversy and not being afraid to speak what is, some would say, is unpopular. But anyway, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so the kind of the 10-second background on me. I'm born and raised near Green Bay, Wisconsin, about 45 minutes north. And I ended up going to college in Milwaukee, and then I stayed in the Milwaukee area to become a police officer. So the first 4.5 years I was an officer was with a suburb of Milwaukee called Muskego, Wisconsin. Very small, 35,000 population, nice suburb. And as a young street cop in my 22 years old, I wanted more action, so I ended up going to the Kenosha Police Department, which is the third largest department in the state of Wisconsin. Kenosha is about 110,000 people, about 220 total sworn, and I went there in 2016. And I was an officer total for 9 years. Left law enforcement, as we'll get to maybe at some point, 2 years ago, almost to the exact month. And I now live in Las Vegas, and I work at the same company that you do.
That's nice. So Vegas is my old stomping grounds. For the newbies to the show who don't know my original story, actually, I was a retired detective from the Las Vegas market. I worked for Henderson PD. If my understanding, Kev, you actually live in Henderson, do you not?
So I did. I now live in Northwest Las Vegas, but the first year and a half that I was here, I lived in right on the Henderson-Las Vegas border.
Okay, awesome. Well, it's a great town. North Las Vegas, they have some good areas, some not so good areas. I actually did more search.
I'm in Northwest Las Vegas.
Okay,
very northwest.
Okay, so you're in the
my backyard is a mountain.
All right, you're in the good part. So when I was an officer in that town, man, I'm gonna tell you, I actually did more search warrants in Las Vegas or North Las Vegas than I did in Henderson, and I was a Henderson detective because these turds would roll over to Henderson and do their dirt and then run back to their little hood over in North Las Vegas. I have a great story about a homicide I worked. Anyway, well, today's not about me. Today's about you, man. It's about you. But more importantly, your time at Kenosha during a specific time. In fact, I'm going to rewind back. I believe it was August 25th of 2020 where the shit hit the fan real bad in Kenosha. And you had a big role to play in that. So let's talk briefly about the history. So you sent me a bunch of photos before the show, and we were doing our prep, and I have a photo of you on the screen right now back when you were in uniform. So did you do the bulk of your career in patrol?
Yes. Yep. Both from Muskego, 4.5 years in Kenosha, 4.5 years I was a patrol officer during that time.
Okay, so let's talk briefly about a young man named Jacob Blake. Now, prior to jumping on the podcast here today, you were telling me a little story about how you were sent to go take a report for apparent sexual assault. Let's talk about that.
All right. So this would have been right around the time of the George Floyd incident in very late May 2020, the incident that obviously set off that whole summer. And so I was a graveyard or night shift police officer, so 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. And Kenosha was a very It is a very, very, very busy city to work in. There is a high crime rate there. So they needed officers to stay over onto day shift to help out day shift patrol. So like many young guys, I loved the overtime money. So I said, sure. So it's early morning. I've worked all night. Now the sun is up, driving around. Call comes out, and a veteran officer gets sent on this call in essentially a housing project area. I jumped it for him, meaning I took it for him. So I go to this residence in this complex, and on a side note, there are so many things that happen at Kenosha during the course of my career that I would never remember because it sadly is just another typical, Tuesday, Wednesday night. But this one I vividly remember, as I'll get to here why. So meet with the complainant, a lady, and she's there with her children. And she said her ex-baby daddy, as she called it, lingo in the street, had broken into her apartment early in the morning, like 5 a.m. She was sleeping in bed with her little 2-year-old son. And the perpetrator who broke in was the father of this little boy. So the suspect comes into the bedroom. He allegedly sexually assaulted her in a really graphic way, right in front of the little boy. And then he runs out into the living room.
Right, so clarification, I don't mean to cut you off, but sexual assault, like, are we talking about a full-blown rape, or was this?
Okay.
Let's a little more detail there.
Yeah, sure. So I'll just say exactly what she said. So she said that he came in the bedroom and he started yelling at her that she was seeing other men, and that he inserted a finger into her lady parts, and smelled his fingers and said, "It smells like you've been with other men, bitch," and then ran off into the living room. And it even as an ex-cop describing that, it's really grotesque. I don't even like describing it, but that's what she said happened. So he then is driving around. He grabs her purse off the counter, leaves the residence, steals her vehicle, and is now driving around Kenosha spending the money on her debit card. And so she's showing me on her phone, where her money is being drained. And so he was not on scene. Obviously, he was gone. Put out, a bolo, be on the lookout. Patrols looking for him. We ultimately could not locate him that day, as much as we tried. And so the way the process works is that case, I write my full police report, get written statements and all that, my investigation, my initial investigation. Detectives take that and run with it. They follow up. They try to locate him. They can't. And then ultimately goes to an arrest warrant. So arrest warrant is out there for this person. So that's that incident in early May, and then late May. And then of course that summer, there were 600, I believe it was figured 600 cities in America had some type of civil unrest / riot. It's not including peaceful protest. We know as police, peaceful protest is constitutionally protected. We're here for it all day. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the summer of riots. And so now we get to August 25th. And any questions, on that? You want me to just jump into what I woke up to on August 25th?
Yes, actually, I was gonna touch briefly, and I'm showing them on the screen. I'm showing them an image that shows what appears to be a white officer in uniform, a black man we now know was Jacob Blake, and he's heading towards a vehicle. And I can tell you, as a retired cop myself, once we get you out of the car, you're not getting back in, because the car could be a threat. There could be unknown weapons, and to my knowledge, I believe he did have a weapon in the car, but I was not privy to that information. So if you could talk briefly about his attempted apprehension.
Sure. And again, I'm speaking about this. I wasn't one of the ones on scene for that, as we'll get to in a minute. But the gist of that incident was Jacob Blake had gone. This is the same housing complex that I had taken that call in back in May. And so we're talking about the same person here. Jacob Blake ended up being the suspect in my incident, which we'll get to in a minute why I didn't realize that months later. But Jacob Blake in late May, he was alleged to have committed that offense. Warrant goes out for sexual assault. Now, end of summer, 911 gets a call from, I believe it was the same woman that I had taken the report from, who shared at least one child with him, saying, "Hey, Jacob Blake just showed up at this party we're having outside. He's causing problems. What I'm paraphrasing here, but he's being disruptive, and he has a warrant. You guys have been looking for him. Send officers. So officers go. My second shift coworkers go and handle it. And again, not trying to speak for what their experience was, but he was not cooperative. He ends up getting into a physical altercation with all three of them. At one point, he actually put one of my coworkers in that video in a brief headlock. So this is a real legit fight. He then produces a karambit knife, which is one of those curved blade, highly dangerous knives. Pulls that out. The officers kind of jump back, create distance, and they're giving him commands. He's not listening. He then starts to move around the front of that vehicle you see in that still shot. And at that point in time, some of the women, or the complainant, is screaming, "My kids are in the car, my kids are in the car." So he's continuing to not listen to commands. He then enters the vehicle. The knife is in his hand. And as he's entering the vehicle, one of my second shift coworkers, shoots him, I believe 6 times at point blank range, trying to not let him enter that vehicle with a dangerous weapon after everything that had just occurred. So that's
any cop in America. We have a certain protocol, rules of engagement, and when not to use deadly force, and it's usually to protect a life or to protect yourself. So if we have an obviously non-compliant person trying to jump into a vehicle with a weapon in his hand, and there's children in there, I think all day, every day, that's a clean shoot in my book.
And this is a really good opportunity to pause. And again, I'm not trying to speak for the experience of my coworkers there, but that's factually essentially what happened. And imagine now being that officer, and in a split second, you've got a guy with a knife who's not listening to you, who just engaged in a violent fight with all three of you. And now you have a woman screaming. He's going into a vehicle with children in it. And you don't know, at this point in time, the officers don't know anything about my call from 3 months prior about who this guy is, his relationship, if these are his kids or not. They don't have any of this information. All they know is this guy with a knife who's violent in that moment is getting into a vehicle with children. And now imagine being that officer. You've got to make truly a split-second decision. And any lethal force situation is incredibly stressful. But this isn't the guy raised a gun at you and clear all day, boom, right? This is that officer is very quickly having to assess everything and make a decision as to what he's going to do. And so just a testament to him, Officer Rustin Chesky, to being in just an incredibly difficult situation, so stressful, worst case scenario. Ultimately, he did what he had to do in that moment to reasonably protect those children from the suspect. So kudos to him, and man, what a crazy situation to be in.
Here's a sad reality of being a police officer in the modern America that we live in today. You have literally a split-second decision, life or death. And I've been there a couple times in my career. I still lose sleep over it today. And then everybody else has the luxury to Monday morning quarterback you for days and weeks on end, frame by frame. And I literally put you under a microscope and try their best to discredit you and blame the cops. When the stats don't prove it, there's all this, look, cops kill so many minorities. It's a bunch of BS when you look at the numbers. And
that's another podcast. The stats are so skewed on that.
It's so skewed.
Stats actually show the opposite. And that's another interesting conversation for another time.
Correct.
But the media's misled the public on what the numbers actually show.
It's ridiculous. And so now we have what I would consider a good shoot, but because of the climate that we live in today, we had a white officer that killed a black person, or didn't kill him, actually shot a black person. He actually claimed he was paralyzed. We'll talk about that briefly. But anyway, so this happens. This is right on the heels of the George Floyd incident, which was horrible. I'll just say that my personal opinion was horrible to watch that and witness, that officer keeping his neck on his knee on the guy's neck. It was bad. Right. It shouldn't have been done. Right. Anyway, no one hates the bad cops more than the good cops. I can assure you of that, folks. So anyway,
part of this conversation, and again, I could talk about that for hours. You're 100% right. And 3 seconds. No cop in America defended what that officer Derek Chauvin did to George Floyd.
Correct.
Everything else what George Floyd's past, whatever, everything else aside, in that moment when that officer had his knee on his neck and he knew that George Floyd no longer had a pulse and stayed there for minutes and didn't render aid and didn't let anybody else render it. Every cop in America said, that's not what we do. That's not how we train. That's completely unprofessional. And whatever should happen to him should happen. The criminal justice system let it work, and it did. They're all in prison. So
as they should be, because
as they should be.
Because
so,
in my entire career, I used force, I think 5 times where I would quote unquote call it significant force. It's mostly because I would treat people with respect and get respect back. And so it wasn't necessary.
Yes.
But we all know there's always 1 or 2 in every department that tends to be a little heavy handed. And we find them, we weed them out, and we get them fired. You know, and so
especially these days, this is not 1970. Those cops, there's no place for those anymore. You have to be a professional, and if you don't have the internal fortitude to do that, and if you let your emotions, if you're so weak that you let someone's words dictate your emotions and then your actions, you let somebody goat you into something, you have no place in law enforcement today, period.
100%. And I'm glad that we try our best to vet them. You should see the process, guys, to get hired as a police officer. Oh my God. It's ridiculous. Like what they put us through to get in. No other profession
besides getting maybe a military clearance, like a top secret clearance. 12 steps in the process, including 8-hour psych, polygraph, background. Right. On your first episode, you talked about that, I think. Anyways, yeah, it's a very rigorous process, but
it is. So now, all right. So this happens, right? The shooting happens.
And to your point, just to wrap that up. So yeah, Jacob Blake did not die in that shooting incident. He lived. So as soon as the officer used deadly force on him, immediately they got him out of the vehicle and started rendering aid. I mean, and there's video of this. They are on the ground trying to keep everybody back, create a safe distance, and they're doing first aid, CPR, whatever. They're trying to keep them. I shouldn't say CPR. I'm not sure what they were exactly what the medical care they're providing, but they were on the ground with him trying to stop the bleeding, which if you're shot, that's number one, is got to plug these holes.
For sure.
So they were rendering aid, trying to save his life. So again, you go from boom, you have to use deadly force on somebody, to now in what other profession do you then have to immediately try to save that person's life?
Right.
Nothing.
Right.
So and that's testament to them again.
That is drilled into officers' behavior as well. And I'm gonna tell you, there've been legal cases where they didn't render aid, and police officers ended up in jail or a prison. So departments all over the country just said, "Hey, look, God forbid if we have to dump someone or shoot someone, you freaking better be doing something to try to save their life until an ambulance can get there." So the shooting happens.
Yes.
Mr. Blake is injured. He's transported to the hospital, and then Kenosha explodes.
Okay. So all this is going on, and I'm asleep. So I'd worked the night before, Saturday night, and it's I go to bed when I got home. That was my routine. So I wake up, I don't know, around maybe 2:30, 3 p.m. in the afternoon. And first thing you do when you wake up is you check your phone. And I look at my phone, and I had about 100 missed calls and 100 text messages. And I have friends, but I'm not that popular. And so I knew in that moment something happened at work. I don't know why. I just clicked on the first text message from a coworker at Kenosha that I saw. I just clicked on one, and there was no text with it, no description. It was just a video that you have a screen grab from of the shooting incident. And for anybody that's curious, that video is all over social media. You can find it and watch that whole scene play out start to finish for yourself. But so I click on this video, and I'm watching the video. It looks like somebody from a second story across the street through like a screen window is filming the police somewhere in America. No clue where it was. Officer comes around, shoots a guy in the vehicle, and that's it. And that's all I see. And I'm looking at this, and I'm like, why did my buddy send this to me? What the heck's going on? And then I look, and I go, wait, I know what street that is. That's a Kenosha police car. That's my coworker, so-and-so, so-and-so, so-and-so. And I realized in that moment, oh my God, this just happened. And oh my God, this is going to blow up. And it's really important to point out that, I mean, that whole summer, every night we would come into roll call at 10 o'clock, TV was on, old tube TV at Kenosha PD, and we're watching the TV, and every night, essentially, I mean, not exaggerating, some city in America was burning. That's the summer Atlanta had major riots. There was a use of force there. Minneapolis, and I mean every night there was some city on fire, it just seemed, and we'd come in and go joke, what city is in riot tonight, and we're watching this, and we all had conversations with each other. We call it 10-25 using 10 codes of Wisconsin, but parked side to side, at night and between calls, and we all realized, I mean, we're all on edge. We realized Kenosha is one incident away from being that city in the news, but there's 18,000 police departments in America. Statistically, we're probably not going to be the one. Now, it's also important to point out Kenosha is located halfway between Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and Chicago. 45 minutes from Milwaukee, an hour to downtown Chicago with decent traffic. Very close, right on the I-94 corridor. So easy to get between both cities. So, and again, it's a violent city. There's areas of it that are incredibly violent. So it's a powder keg, and we knew that, one incident away. So, okay, wake up, see this video, go to my voicemails, Sergeant. So I was on the riot team as well. So I was on the riot team. I was a crisis negotiator, and our riot team had just gotten stood up that about 6 months prior in February, because that August, the Democratic National Convention was going to be held in Milwaukee. So we had all these federal funds to create a civil response unit to go down there and help with that. So before that, Kenosha did not have a riot unit. Now they, again, civil arrest, whatever unit, but the riot squad, if you will. So we were brand new, and I was on one of the teams. So my sergeant, hey, voicemail, get your ass in here as soon as you wake up, shit's hitting the fan. So I race into Kenosha, and as I'm going down the highway, I mean, there's police vehicles from other jurisdictions racing past me, and I knew where they were headed. And again, I had no context. I see a video, and at first glance, I can understand people going, the video looks bad. I get that, but I knew there's going to be a hell of a lot more to it. So get to work, and everybody's already suited up. So I'm throwing my gear on. Guys are helping me get Velcroed up.
Hey, so here, I don't mean to interrupt you, but
yeah, no, that's fine.
And the media was throwing gas on the fire too, right? They're talking about, white cops shoots this black man in the back. I remember watching on the news.
Yeah,
shot him in the back, and I'm like, but come on, well, so they're leaving out very important detail.
Yes, and so as I'm getting suited up, again, none of us knew what happened. I mean, people think that if I'm a police officer in Kenosha, in the police department getting suited up, I know all the details of what happened on some shooting scene across town. I had no clue. None of us knew anything. We had just seen this video floating around from 2 hours prior, and that's it. And so we're all talking about what the heck's going on, what happened, I don't know. Are the officers okay? What's the status out there? And our radios are on. And so we're hearing radio chatter from that scene, which is not too far from the police department, maybe a 10-minute drive. So it's turning to chaos. I mean, that whole neighborhood, again, it's row housing, and so everybody's coming out of their homes, and they're agitated. I mean, or many of them were agitated, right? So they're encroaching on the crime scene. And in Wisconsin, there's a law. I don't know what year it was passed. Within the past 10 years, when there's an officer-involved shooting, an outside agency has to come in to investigate it. Instead of the police department runs their own investigation, the policy and procedure, but an outside agency has to do the actual investigation.
Yeah, they do that in Nevada too, because they don't want any bias, because they don't want to have the good old boy system. They try to call it sometimes. Say, well,
yes, that's highly overblown today. If a police department investigated their own shooting, they're not going to lie about it. But again, if it makes people feel like there's less bias, great. And again, I think it's fantastic. Whatever. So we use the Wisconsin Department of DCI, Department of Criminal Investigation. So those agents had come to Kenosha immediately. So we had the DCI agents on the scene with the Kenosha Police and the Sheriff's Department helping to secure the scene. And as they're trying to process the scene, again, I'm getting this through radio chatter. The group that is now forming is throwing stuff at them. They're ripping down the crime scene tape. They're coming into the crime scene, and the officers and deputies, everybody out there, they're trying to keep people back, but it's getting really dangerous really quickly. I mean, it is escalating fast. And so we're geared up, and of course we want to go out there and help them, but our responsibility was going to be to protect the police department. And I'll get to that in a minute, why that was so important. So as the time goes on, we hear basically Broken Arrow being called out there. And so,
wow.
It was like they lost the crime scene. And so my understanding was DCI, they had done their investigation. They were already wrapping up, but people ripped the crime scene tape down and they got overrun. I mean, truly overrun. And so there's a video out there somewhere on the internet that hasn't been taken down. One of our police captains who was out there, I mean, the video is like right there. And he's standing there and a brick comes flying from the crowd, hits him in the head, and he goes down, knocked out cold. And we're hearing this now on the radio in the police, in headquarters, in the room where we're staging it. And we're hearing, I mean, screaming on the radio, like, you know, hey, he just got knocked out. We're getting overrun. And they're now backing up down the street. Their squad cars are taking rocks and bottles, getting all battered to hell. And they're backing out. And I never, ever compare. I wasn't in the military, so I don't ever compare law enforcement, my experience, to anything in the military, because what the hell do I know? I wasn't in the military. I was never in combat. But from talking to cops that were out there that had been in the military, they're like, it felt like we were leaving a combat zone, trying to get the hell out of a combat zone. And so they're backing up. The crowd is now following them. The crowd is now moving towards the police department.
Wow, that's got to be a little unnerving for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So and again, we're being told, we were getting briefed. Hey guys, the crowd is going to come here next. Get ready. And so those cops, the DCI agents, everybody gets out of that crime scene, and they're coming back to the police department to kind of regroup. And again, this is happening so quick. We're trying to figure this out. Our command staff is in. They're trying to get everything organized as quickly as possible, because we got about 30 minutes before we have hundreds of people that are attacking the building. And so if you recall, this is the time that Seattle PD, they lost one of their precincts, got totally taken over.
Yeah, they let them burn it to the ground.
So it was Minneapolis that it got burned. I forgot the name of the precinct, but
so that was in Minneapolis. Okay, got it.
Yeah, so that one got burned, and that one, I've actually been there, by the way. That's a different story, but I've seen it in person last year. I went there specifically to go to that whole site, but and it's still shuttered to this day. So with that, they lost the precinct. It got torched, and they actually had to use helicopters to get the last officers out of that precinct.
Wow.
And those officers, and if you listen to their stories, they thought they're calling their wives like, I'm not going to make it out of here. I'm going to die.
Well, for sure. If you're surrounded and hundreds of people.
It's heartbreaking, right? So we're all talking, we knew there's a huge potential that this group is going to try to overtake the police department and or burn it down, because that's what's been, again, Minneapolis, Seattle, they're going to try that here. That's the tactic being used by some of these violent groups. So we're also understaffed. This is a Sunday night in summer. So a lot of the guys that were off and gals that were off were, out on their boats drinking, whatever. They couldn't come in. If you've had anything to drink that day, you can't come to work. So a lot of people could not be called into work. So we have kind of a skeleton crew that we're working with. And we have to do the best we can. And we have other agencies coming in to help us, thankfully, but there's not enough people there. So above the Kenosha Police Department is a jail. That's our county jail. So we also can't lose the police department, because there's hundreds of inmates on multiple levels above the PD. So we're responsible for their safety. Now, does the group outside care about that or what? Probably not. They're not thinking about that. They just want to destroy the police department. We're thinking about the safety. We're responsible for everybody in there, including the inmates. So night falls. My group is now in the vestibule of the police department. So we have one set of glass double doors, little vestibule area, another set of double doors, and then you come into the lobby. So that's the choke point. So we're all crammed into that little vestibule, and I managed to be right in front. So it's me and another guy, glass doors, outside parking lot. So, and everybody else behind us. Sure enough, here comes a crowd. And now it's just a battle royale. I mean, there's so much smoke out there. There's CS gas being fired. We've got our gas masks on. It's hot as hell. You can't breathe. Masks are fogging up. You can't see for crap. And It's loud as hell. And we also knew people out there right in front of us in this parking lot have guns. You can see them. You can see guns being waved around. And so we're just there with our batons. And at one point, the glass door in front of me, the plate glass window completely shatters. And it sounded like a gunshot. And in the split second, I thought I got shot. I figured somebody outside took a pot shot, and now I'm getting hit because I'm in front. Luckily, that wasn't the case. It was a CS canister that somehow, I don't know how it ricocheted back, but it came back, blew out the window. Now it's, leaking CS next to me. And
that's always fun.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And you always get a little bit through the seal.
If you've never experienced CS gas or OC spray, folks, it is a life-changing event.
Hell on earth.
Trust me, it really blows.
Yeah.
And so you're like literally like in a war zone. You're defending your PD, and you have hundreds of people coming at you.
Windows are being smashed out, and this is a building that was designed a long time ago. There's a row of windows around the whole building. So, and there's literally like the landscaping is like rocks with little dinky plants. So there's rocks everywhere that people are picking up and throwing.
Nice.
In hindsight, right? Not the most well thought out concept, but who knew when it was built, whatever, 1950s. So perfect storm. So this just goes on for hours and hours and hours. And now, we're totally exhausted, hungry, thirsty, adrenaline dump. Finally, about 4 a.m, people are going home. The crowd is breaking. There's still stragglers out there. And at this point in time, one of the officers, somebody comes over and says, "Hey guys, really bad news. But there's a parking structure kitty corner to the police department that we all parked in. Not a secured structure, public parking. People using the train to go to Chicago can park there. So not a secured site." They said the people out there figured out that you guys all parked in that parking structure, and a small group got in there and they torched all of your personal cars, all of them. The whole structure's lost, is what we were told by somebody. Now this is rumor mill stuff. And so, yes, our personal vehicles, essentially right around the corner, we were told they lost the garage. Like a group got in there and they just destroyed every vehicle in there. Now our guys, this is personal. We've been there since noon, right? And exhausted. It's 4 a.m, and now we're told your personal vehicles are lost. And so we're all like, what the hell are you talking about? Guys are panicking. My personal information is in there, my address. My wife's at home with our new baby. Guys are panicking, and for good reason, right? And so I said, okay, I'm going to go figure out what the hell's going on. I need to know if this is true or not, because I'm looking at all my guys and they're having meltdowns about this as we're sitting here, for good reason.
Who wouldn't?
Right.
Who wouldn't have it?
So we said, can we go over there right now and check? The crowd's breaking. Can we go? And they said, no, stand your ground here. We got to make sure that, building's secured. Fine, get that, whatever. But I'm looking at everybody and I said, I got to do something about this. So I kind of broke rank. Not like in any kind of dramatic way, but I just started walking out to the left and down the street to the parking structure. I said, guys, I'll be right back. I'll figure out what the hell's going on. And I'm geared up. I look like the Michelin Man in all black gear, right? All the riot stuff. And I'm just walking like this, and I'm pissed. And I'm walking by people that, had been there all night kind of battling with us. And they're looking at me and they're like, this guy looks freaking insane. So nobody said anything to me. They're just watching me walk by alone. I go into the parking garage, walk in there, I stop, I look around, go up to the second and third floor. Everything was okay. One vehicle had the windows smashed out and tires slashed. Come to find out, some other cops had caught the group that was in there and kicked them out before they could destroy all of our vehicles. So the torching thing turned into a rumor. And so I go back, I said, guys, our vehicles are fine. And they're like, you're lying to us. You're just trying to calm us down, Kevin. I said, no, I promise. Guys, our shit's fine. And it's funny. I just bought, people make fun of me for it. And I take the joke and I make jokes about it. I just bought a brand new RAV4 hybrid. That
very masculine vehicle.
So proud of, right? So, and I joked that it was my truck because everybody there drove big.
I drive a truck.
Yeah. So it was all good fun. So one of the guys goes, no, if they had torched Kevin's new RAV4, he would be fucking livid right now. So they go, okay, he's telling the truth. So that was night one. We go home and we're told, come back, go sleep a few hours and come back like late morning. So we all go home, get a few hours of sleep, and now starts Monday night. And so I'll kind of go through Monday quicker.
Okay, wait, before we go too deep, because this is great content and I can't wait to share it with the rest of the audience out there. So we realize that obviously the attack on the precinct, the city's on fire, they're burning down buildings. So the building that you sent me the photo, is that just what building was that was torched up, that was like fully engulfed in flame?
Yeah, that was in a neighborhood called Uptown.
Okay. And so they're basically burning down their own neighborhood, right?
Yes,
and then a young kid, a 17-year-old, I would say child, a very mature child, I've actually met the young man, comes from Illinois, drives over to Kenosha, armed with an AR-15, to go there and to protect one of a friend of his property. Is that correct? Is that what happened?
Yes, he had been apparently asked to guard a car lot.
Okay, got it. That was what I thought. Now, as a dad and having a child that is similar in age, I can't imagine letting my kid grab an AR-15, drive to another state to go protect property. I'm not here to Monday morning quarterback the young man at all. In fact, I support what he did. I know some of you won't like that, but that's okay. Get over it. And I would just tell you, this young kid who made national news, who became, I guess, a notorious celebrity for some degree, a young man by the name of Kyle Rittenhouse. And there was a very controversial shooting that happened there. Well, some would say it's controversial. I don't think it's controversial at all. I thought it was just self-defense, proven by the courts. And so that all happened in the same city shortly after this whole incident you're talking about. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So what I want to do, I'm going to kind of pump the brakes a wee bit.
Okay.
And we're going to do an episode 2 where we're going to do a breakdown of the Rittenhouse shooting, or I would say the Rittenhouse self-defense. And we're going to bring Kevin back for another episode. So for those of you who just, I don't know what happened here, but we just lost Kevin. It was a real odd little thing that he just timed out on us. But here's what I want you guys to understand. I want you to realize that, see, as a police officer in the United States, you're constantly Monday morning quarterbacked, and they're constantly trying to throw us under the bus. And they don't realize what really happens on the inside as an officer, as a first responder, having to deal with a critical incident where you have to make a decision literally in a fraction of a second. So in the next episode, we're going to be breaking down the Kyle Rittenhouse shooting. I have reached out to the Kyle team. I'm going to try and get him on the show if I can. Kevin will be here with us as well. And it's going to be an amazing episode. So thank you so much for being here, spending this little half an hour with us. Please do me a big favor. Go to your Spotify app or your iTunes app or anywhere you would get a podcast and download and follow our show. It would help us, because I'm going to tell you guys, this podcast is where truth will live. This podcast, there will be no hypocrisy, and we're going to give it to you straight and unedited. Thank you so much for being here. Make sure you like and subscribe, and we will catch you guys on the next one. God bless each and every one of you. Take care of one another, and we'll see you on the next show.
I never imagined a love like yours. Through all the endless nights, you were the one I was searching for, looking for the one that was worth it, yeah. And all this time, you were right here by my side. You were right here. Through all the pain and the heartaches, now it's all messed up, and I'm walking down, slamming the door. And now I'm riding off into the dark on a wild horse, yeah, with nothing but my thoughts